So I grew up in CCIC called Chinese Church of Christ. It's in Mountain View. There you go. I attended church every week as a little kid growing up, but I didn't really do a good job of living it out. At that time, it didn't really make sense to me. I was a class clown. I was a bully. I was all those things. I remember when I was a little kid, we had a nanny, and me and my brothers, all we would do was just pull pranks on her all day. So one day we went to a restaurant and we got a bunch of toothpicks. So we were like, okay, what am I going to do with these toothpicks? So we took all these toothpicks, we stuck them in the couch in her favorite seat, like straight up, while she was in the shower. So she, took a shower, took a nap, which I didn't anticipate her doing. And then 2 hours later, I got bored, and I was like, I'm going to go watch TV. So I walk over to the couch, sit down, right on the same toothpicks that I had laid down. And I checked and realized that my butt was bleeding. And that was the type of kid that I was growing up. And it's kind of embarrassing, but I just was the worst kid. I would go to Sunday school. I would make my Sunday school teachers cry. They would give me prizes. I would throw them on the ground. And I was just, a mess. Then I got into youth group my ninth grade year. I went to youth group at CCIC. I got baptized, and that's when everything started to make sense. That's when I started to realize, this is what fellowship is like. This is what love is all about. This is what, this is Christian fellowship. So I went on to go to school. I went to Harvard University, and I really struggled my first year and a half there because I didn't really have a community. I didn't have a fellowship. I just showed up, and I was just basically immersed into the basketball community, basketball team, and so I didn't have any accountability. Then I got plugged into Asian American Christian Fellowship, and the last 2 years in college, I was part of a small group that me and my friends led. And that's when my faith started to grow again. And then this past summer, I signed with the Warriors, and this is the main point of my testimony. I remember I had signed in July, and right after that, I felt like I was on top of the world. I had so much media. I had thousands of Facebook friend requests. And I was like, wow, this is so cool. All these random people are friending me on Facebook. I remember I went to Taiwan to play in Yao Ming's charity game, and I got to meet Yao, who, as you guys know, is very tall. I actually don't even go up to his shoulder. So it's pretty crazy. He's pretty tall. And so I just remember my life changed overnight. I was like literally walking around Palo Alto one day, not a big deal, and then the next day, everyone was coming up to me congratulating me. And for me, I was like, okay, this is cool. This is like, I can use this, I can live this life, this is a lot of fun. And I thought, okay, I went to Harvard, I struggled, and I had a strong foundation, and I figured, I'm ready for the challenges that the NBA has to offer. I feel like my faith is strong enough. But I was humbled very, very quickly. Within, a couple months, during training camp, I was already, during preseason games, I was playing behind players who weren't even on a team. Like, they bring in different guys to help practice. I was behind those guys in terms of the depth chart. Then, as the season went on, I would only play when we were down 20 points or up 20 points, and most of the time we were down 20 points.
It's okay.
I started to struggle. I started to lose confidence. I remember my coaches trying to encourage me, and then, but at that point, I just didn't feel like I had my swagger on the court. So in December, I was sent down to the D-League. I remember my first D-League game, I had maybe 10 points, and right after that game, we took a 9-hour bus ride to Bakersfield. And on that bus ride, I'll tell you, that was the longest 9 hours of my life, because I was so, I put so much stress on myself, I put so much pressure on myself. I remember, the cut deadline, January, I think 21st, is like the date that they can cut players. If you make it past that date, then you're on the team, on the roster for the rest of the year. I was worried about the cut deadline. I was worried about my performance. I was worried about how much would the D-League coach play me. What happens if I come down here, I play bad, and there's other players that play better than me? How could I face my family? How could I face my agent, my friends, if I go back and I do a horrible job, and I just remember putting all this pressure on myself, and I couldn't sleep at all on the bus. And December 29th, 2010, I keep a diary. I know that's kind of girly, but I occasionally write in my diary.
Aww.
I wrote, "This is probably the closest to depression I've been. I lack confidence on the court. I'm not having fun playing basketball anymore. I hate being in the D League, and I want to rejoin the Warriors. I feel embarrassed and like a failure." Then on January 21st, 2011, I wrote in my diary, I actually wrote, "I wish I had never signed with the Warriors." And so at that time, I know a lot of you guys are looking at me like I'm crazy, but that's really the amount of pressure and the amount of stress that I put on myself to the point where I really lost my joy, my passion, and my purpose in basketball. And I remember at that time, none of the paychecks, the car, the fame, none of the NBA lifestyle, none of that stuff, my dream job, my dream life, none of that meant anything to me anymore. Because I was in a really tough situation. Basketball had consumed my time, it consumed my energy, it consumed all my thoughts, it consumed my happiness. My happiness was dependent on how well I played. If I didn't play well, I wasn't happy. And at that point I started to realize, this is becoming an idol for me. It's becoming everything. It's becoming so important. It's my number one priority in my life. And so that's when I realized I need to start trusting in God more. And I always had the head knowledge of knowing that, but it was tougher to implement it into my life. And so that's when I started to realize I need to trust God more. And for those of you guys who really know my story top to bottom, you would understand that for me to not trust God is crazy because His fingerprints are all over my story from top to bottom. I'm going to read you guys a list of things that had to happen for me to get into the NBA, and none of these things have anything to do with me or anything to do with me controlling the situation. My dad moved to America in 1977, turned on the TV, and fell in love with basketball. I was born into a family where basketball was just part of my life. I was, 5 years old playing basketball. I got the genes that allowed me to be 6'3", 200 pounds. Both my parents are 5'6". They both weigh about 110 pounds. My brothers both weigh about 130 to 140 pounds. How did I become 6'3", 200 pounds? That's not something that I can control. I got the genes to be the most competitive person in the family. I was notorious for throwing controllers when I lost in video games growing up, but that turned out to be a blessing. I'm not encouraging you guys to throw controllers. I grew up with two brothers who both loved basketball and pushed me really hard. I found an AAU coach and a high school coach who both fell in love with my game, fell in love with how I played, and really took me under their wing to develop me. This is huge because both my brothers never had that opportunity. They never had a coach who really took them under their wing and just became kind of their mentor and their best friend for 6 years. I broke my ankle my junior year, which turned out to be a turning point in my life because that's when I started to realize I need to stop taking everything for granted. And then coming out of high school, I was recruited by Harvard and Brown. I was dying to go to Stanford. God closed that door, thankfully, to me. And as a result, I went to Harvard. If I had gone to Stanford, I can promise you I would not have been able to make it to the NBA because I would have developed as a player. I wouldn't have been able to play as much early on. And so it was huge for me to go to a smaller school and develop. After my freshman year at Harvard, they hired Coach Amaker, who completely transformed the entire program. Harvard basketball has never had a coach like Coach Amaker, and for it to happen during my sophomore year was, again, something I couldn't control. I was able to find a Christian agent who loves God, believes in me, and was able to give me spiritual advice as I struggled throughout the season. On draft night, Donnie Nelson, who's the general manager of the Dallas Mavericks, who are about to win the NBA championship. I'm not rooting for them because I could have had a ring if I had signed with them. So, don't get me twisted, but he called me right before the draft was over, and he said, I want to offer you a spot on my summer league team. That was the only team that had offered me a spot on the summer league team. If that had never happened, I would never had a chance. I got hurt during my pre-draft workouts. I hurt my Achilles, and literally the morning of the start of Summer League, I was cleared to play. That morning that training camp started, I was cleared to play, and I was healthy enough to play. Summer League went on. We played 5 games. There's 30 teams in the NBA. We play 5 games. We play 5 teams. One of them happened to be the Washington Wizards. The Washington Wizards
John Wall.
Had the #1 pick in the draft.
John Wall.
John Wall. That game, Roddy Dubois, who was the starting point guard, hurt his ankle. That's something I couldn't control. As a result, I got more minutes. And then it happened, I have to play my best quarter of basketball in the fourth quarter of that game. And that's my path to the NBA. And if you look back at each of those things, you would understand that's not something that I can directly control. I can't directly say, I'm going to be the most competitive, or I'm going to be the tallest, or I'm going to weigh the most, or I'm going to find this coach. All these people, all these things came into my life, and they are all blessings from God. And as I look back, I realize these are His